What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the Research CBD YouTube channel. My name is Sydney, and today's video, I am going to be reacting to a Cheech Chong history lesson off of YouTube. If you don't know a ton about Cheech Chong, honestly, I do not know the history of who they are and where they came from and why they are so popular. I know little bits and pieces, and obviously in the cannabis culture, they are huge icons, but who are they? Where did they start? So I'm really excited to learn about them, and I hope that this is educational, entertaining. It is our first reaction video, so by the end of the video, please let us know if you want more of these. Please send us links if you want us to react to more videos, and they're gonna keep them coming because one, is very entertaining for me to learn and to watch, and two, I love watching these kinds of videos as well, so I hope you do too. Before we get started, as always, if you like the video, if you like what you see, make sure to like the video, physically like it down below, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where we post new videos every single week. So let's start watching the video. The title of this video is called The Untold Truth of Cheech Chong.
Raunchy and irreverent, Richard Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong captured the spirit of the 70s counterculture with an authenticity that couldn't be denied. Keep watching to discover the untold truth of this iconic duo.
Okay, so first things first, obviously, they really got the attention in the 70s, which I kind of knew that already. I feel like the 70s is very iconic for that whole revolution and where it all really began and where people start to have fun, let loose. So already getting a little bit of a history lesson here.
Richard Anthony Cheech Marin was born on July 13, 1946 in South Central Los Angeles. His father, Oscar, was an officer with the LAPD, while his mother, Elsa, worked as a secretary. He received the nickname Cheech from an uncle who joked that baby Richard looked like a fried pork.
Okay, that's something super interesting to note. So Cheech, this is Cheech, right? His dad was an LAPD officer and his mom's a secretary. So both of his parents obviously probably enforce some sort of law in the household. And back then, much more so than today, cannabis was not, something that was sought out after. It was not something that was normalized as much as today. So I find it always interesting to figure out, who they are, but also where someone comes from.
Rind, chicharron in Spanish. While still a child, Marin moved with his parents to the suburb of Granada Hills, where he attended a Catholic high school. He had musical aspirations and performed in bands with his friends. He was a straight-A student, but he also had a reputation as a class clown, which frequently landed him in hot water. After high school, Marin attended California State University at Northridge, where he tried marijuana for the first time. Upon taking his first...
I feel like we all knew those people in high school too, right? I was not one of them. I was not the straight A student, but I love to laugh. I love those kinds of people. There are definitely people that come to mind from my high school. So if that's anything like you, imagine going to high school with Cheech. Back then, it's nothing, but now, knowing what you know now, how iconic is that?
Puff, the formerly straight-laced Marin, was transformed. Dismissing the propaganda that adults had fed him about the drug, he mused, "What else have they been lying to me?"
Stopping the video, but he tried marijuana for the first time in college. So he was super straight and narrow throughout high school, didn't touch it in high school, and now goes to college and tries it for the first time. So I'm really curious as to when you tried for the first time. For me, it was in high school, but I was not an avid user versus some people, obviously they start super young. Some people later in life, some people have never tried it before. So I'm just really curious, comment down below.
Marin also became active in the anti-war and draft resistance movements while in college. With draft resistors being imprisoned, he escaped to Canada with the help of his pottery teacher. He then worked as an apprentice to a famous potter and settled down to rustic life in a secluded log cabin in the Canadian wilderness. Thomas Chong was born on May 24, 1938, to Dad Stanley, a Chinese immigrant who worked as a truck driver, and Mom, Lorna Jean, a Canadian waitress. He grew up in Calgary, Alberta, as the product of an interracial marriage, learning hard lessons about racism from an early age. In a 2020 interview with The Guardian, he opened up about his childhood in his conservative hometown. While recalling his exclusion from a friend's birthday party, he noted, "I just looked out of the window of the second story and could see my friends gathering around the fire. I was uninvited because the girl's father was worried she might end up with a colored guy or Chinese guy."
Interesting to note too, obviously coming from a biracial background, I don't know if you guys know this, probably not because we don't talk about it, but all my sisters and I come from our mom is American and our dad is Iranian, so we are half Iranian, half American. Obviously did not face the same struggles that Chong faced growing up, and growing up in a much smaller, more conservative town. Again, learning about people's backgrounds, where they come from and who they are today, especially when they're iconic figures like them. It's always so fun to learn, and literally I had no idea any of this before this moment.
At the age of 16, Chong dropped out of high school to pursue a career in music. A talented guitarist, he landed a gig with The Shades, a multiracial soul group out of Calgary. Changing their name to Little Daddy and The Bachelors, the band moved to Vancouver, where they released a single and built a small following. They would reach their pinnacle when they became known as Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers.
Musicians.
Recommended to Berry Gordy by Diana Ross and the Supremes, the band signed with Motown and recorded the top 40 hit Does Your Mama Know About Me? Co-written by Chong and Bobby Taylor, the touching ballad about an interracial couple peaked at number 29 on the Billboard Hot 100 and made it to the top 5 on the R&B charts. Chong was ultimately fired from his band, so he pocketed a $5,000 severance check and made his way back to Vancouver. While on the road, his parents had converted one of the night spots he owned into the Shanghai Junk.
Someone out there definitely knows. No idea this guy was like a musical genius. That's so cool to learn about that. I wonder, I bet they're gonna get into it, like when he started smoking.
Vancouver's first topless club. During his time with Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers, Chong had been exposed to the comedy of Chicago's Second City. He found renewed purpose in improv, and the Shanghai Junk was the perfect venue to hone his chops. Recruiting 4 topless dancers, a mime, and a classical guitarist, he was going to reinvent burlesque for the hippie generation. Meanwhile, Cheech had migrated to Vancouver and found work as a part-time writer for a local music magazine. His editor suggested that he meet Chong. The unconventional pair hit it off, and Cheech was brought on as a writer. The duo's famous act came about by accident when Chong and his new music group were scheduled to play their first show. To warm up the crowd beforehand, Cheech and Chong came out to tell some jokes. The audience was doubled over with laughter as one hilarious bit led into another. The act ultimately went on so long that there was no time for the band to play.
We always approached comedy as music. Had a certain rhythm to it, had a certain beat. You knew when to come in, when to not come in.
An energized Cheech.
Wow. Like, the world collides. How did Cheech end up in Vancouver, of all places? Same place as Chong. A friend joins them together, and we get to experience this iconic duo. Like, forever changed.
An energized Cheech and Chong eventually headed for the comedy capital of the world, Los Angeles. They landed a gig at an open mic night, but they struggled financially and were forced to move in with Chong's estranged wife, making for a living situation that quickly became untenable. Circumstances became especially dire when dwindling profits forced Chong's Vancouver nightclubs to close. Slowly, Cheech and Chong began performing regular gigs at several Southern California clubs. After one disastrous show, they decided that they just weren't connecting with their audience. They then mined the peace, love, and dope ethos of the era for material to develop their Pedro and Man characters. The audience response was immediate. The lovable stoners were comedy gold, which led to sold-out shows, better venues, and a deal to make their first comedy record when music producer Lou Adler caught their act. With $2,000, a tape recorder, and a rehearsal space at A&M Records, Cheech and Chong crafted a comedy masterpiece that showcased their wit, razor-sharp timing, and brilliant characterizations. Released in August 1971,
Had no idea that they started out their career together as a band. I thought they just started acting. I thought they were just, this iconic duo created, like Hollywood created, you know what I mean? Like, I think they had their personality, or I thought they had their personalities, that they got put into these roles, but had no idea that they had essentially a prior life to being in movies. So, am I just really out of touch with that? How many other people had no idea?
1971, their self-titled debut album connected with critics and audiences alike, eventually peaking at number 28 on the Billboard charts and earning the duo what would be the first of 6 Grammy nominations for Best Comedy Recording. In 1978, Cheech and Chong set their sights on conquering Hollywood with their first feature film, Up in Smoke. Although they originally conceived the movie as a compilation of the best bits from their albums and live shows, they ultimately decided to concentrate on their Pedro and Man characters. As Cheech explains to Rolling Stone in 2018, it was a day in the life of Pedro and Man, which was more interesting than a plot. It's 2 guys meet, they decide to form a band together, but first they need a joint. Therein lies your plot. With no formal script, Up in Smoke was largely improvised. With Lou Adler at the helm, Cheech Chong had free rein to experiment. Nonetheless, the movie faced its share of obstacles on its journey to the screen. Upon seeing a rough cut of the film, then Paramount president Michael Eisner pulled the plug on the picture. Adler bought the film back from the studio, using his own money to complete it. After witnessing a test audience's reaction, Eisner relented and Paramount bought the film back.
Wow.
Budgeted at just under $2 million, Up in Smoke wound up making $20 million in its first month of release. Cheech Chong followed Up in Smoke with Cheech Chong's next movie in 1980 and Nice Dreams in 1981.
So they got into music, used their music to get into Hollywood, and then they became their own. They were directing it, screenwriting it. I mean, they're literally just using their lives to get into Hollywood, which is pretty freaking genius.
Sticking to their patented drug humor, the new movies failed to live up to the high standards set by the first film, but they were still filled with classic moments and turned a tidy profit against their relatively low budgets. The duo's next film, 1982's Things Are Tough All Over, featured Cheech Chong temporarily putting down their giant spliffs for a more story-oriented comedy. The following year, they returned with Still Smokin', a loose collection of sketches and concert footage that finds the stoners in Amsterdam for a film festival. Critics weren't kind, though fans stood by the duo and their bawdy juvenile humor. However, their next project, a radical departure from their tried-and-true formula.
I wonder what was going through their minds throughout all these films. 'Cause now it's their fourth or fifth film that they've created, roughly $2 million or so going into each film. They're making a good amount on it. But after more failed films, I wonder what kept them going into creating more. Obviously, they mentioned that the fans were really diehard fans and they supported the duo, but they were not getting the same reactions or the same view count. Imagine today how social media works. You put something out there, it goes viral, you get all the hits, then you put out more and more content, it doesn't do nearly as well. Obviously nowadays it's really hard to stay motivated and to keep putting out content that's very true to you. And for them, that's what they were doing prior to Instagram, YouTube, social media. They put out content. The first one was a major hit and the other ones were good, maybe not as good. And they just kept rolling with it. So that's amazing. I'm inspired.
Formula left even the most loyal Cheech and Chong devotees wondering what the pair were smoking. Cheech and Chong's The Corsican Brothers, released in 1984, cast the comedy legends in a spoof of Alexandre Dumas' classic story of brothers who can feel each other's physical pain. Reviews were generally dismissive, and audiences took a pass as well. Failing to make back even half of its $10 million budget, The Corsican Brothers would be Cheech and Chong's final feature. In 1985, Cheech and Chong released the album and home video Get Out of My Room. It would be their final release before an acrimonious split. After nearly 2 decades, ego and creative differences had soured their friendship. Although they'd soldiered on through their differences, never allowing their animosity toward each other to affect their working relationship, tensions between the two eventually became unbearable. During a conversation with Talks at Google in 2017, Cheech noted, "There was always a contentious conversation between Tommy and I because we were very strong personalities, but it was the irritant that produced the pearl." He also insisted that the cause of the breakup came down to Chong's inflated ego.
As we went along and got more success, Tommy wanted to be everything. He wanted to be the director and the sole writer.
Chong's refusal to participate in the recording of the song Born in East LA was the final straw for Marin. Decades later, a humbler Tommy Chong agrees with his partner's assessment of their breakup. During a radio appearance in 2020, he admitted, "I was really hurt, although it was probably my fault why we broke up, you know. I got to be a bit of a megalomaniac when it came to the movies because I ended up directing them. Once you become a director, your word's God, and it's hard to lose that."
When he first went on his own, I felt really betrayed.
The song Born in East LA, a parody of Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, was credited to both Cheech and Chong, even though it was actually by Cheech.
Okay, that's super sad. I mean, also think about it. These guys were together for, 2 decades. That's a long time, obviously, to have a really close friend group that not only you're just friends with, but you're working with, you're creating with, you're directing with. I imagine if you're married, have a spouse, even your best friend, maybe your business partner. 2 decades is a long time. And there's bound to be some headbutts. But even looking back again, my idea of Cheech and Chong was always they're just best friends, they get along, they're on all those stoner movies. But to, again, learn about how they got there and who they were as people is obviously very interesting, very fun. And now, I mean, now I know they both have their own brands. They're probably friends again, but I don't know. We'll find out.
By Cheech on his own. It was a huge hit, which led to Universal executive Frank Price suggesting to Cheech that the story of a hapless Mexican-American man's misadventures after being mistakenly deported would make for a great comedy feature. Cheech jumped at the opportunity as he wrote, directed, and starred in his first major project without Tommy Chong. Released in 1987, Born in East LA established Cheech as a creative force on his own. With a knack for creating characters through accents and dialects, the newly liberated Cheech became an in-demand voice actor, as he would go on to show up in the likes of Oliver and Company and The Lion King. He also got the chance to show off a subtler side of his comedic skills in the 1996 rom-com Tin Cup.
Oh my gosh!
By the late 90s, Cheech had put the drug-addled comedy of his past mostly behind him. A new generation of fans would come to know him not as the perennially wasted Pedro, but as San Francisco Special Investigator Joe Dominguez on the CBS cop show Nash Bridges. He also became a familiar face in director Robert Rodriguez's action movies and kids' comedies. In 2012, Tommy Chong let the public in on his health struggles by announcing that he'd been diagnosed with prostate cancer. A longtime advocate for marijuana legalization and the medical use of cannabis, he turned to the plant as part of his treatment.
But now that I found out that the hemp oil will help the prostate, hey, I'm back, man.
Less than a year later, Chong announced that with a combination of hash oil and dietary supplements, he had, quote, kicked cancer's ass. Unfortunately, he would face another health setback in 2015 when he announced that although his prostate cancer was in remission, he was now under treatment for rectal cancer. In typical Chong style, he took the news with optimism and humor. He told Us Weekly, "I'm using cannabis like crazy now, more so than ever before. I'm in treatment now. Either I get healed or I don't, but either way, I'm going to make sure I get a little edge off or put up." A Cheech and Chong reunion has been in the works since 2003, with the iconic comedy duo planning a new movie. But when Chong served a prison sentence for drug paraphernalia charges that year, it derailed their big screen plans. But eventually, to the delight of their legions of fans, the duo finally reteamed for a 2008 nationwide comedy tour. On stage together for the first time in 25 years, Cheech and Chong found that the old magic was as vibrant as ever. As Cheech told NPR, "When we came back last year to start doing this, we didn't really even rehearse. We just kind of talked over what we were going to do and then went on stage and did it. It was like we've been apart 25 seconds, not 25 years." Over a decade into their reunion, the pair continue to pack theaters for their sold-out live shows. Even though Cheech is now in his 70s and Chong is in his 80s, they're still smoking in the 21st century. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stars are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.
Oh my gosh. So pretty much, they're still kicking it. They're in their 70s and 80s. They're doing fine. I do recall now, obviously, seeing the images of Cheech more prevalently. He definitely took his career and went into acting, obviously created his movies, and was more consistent, I would say, over time, versus Chong obviously had some health issues. He had a little bit of an ego check early on in their relationship, and now they're back and doing some stuff. But all in all, again, I think learning about, where cannabis culture comes from and where it originated, the people who are involved in it is always extremely interesting to me. And I don't claim to know everything and all the things about cannabis culture, which is why I like watching these videos and learning about it in a very entertaining way. It's always fun for me to share those experiences. If you have not heard of this video, hopefully you can go watch it now on your own, make your own assumptions and your own reactions to it. But if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. Give it a like down below and comment below if you're Team Cheech or Team Chong. And we'll see you in the next video.